Hi, I'm Derri, and I've read it before. Today we're going to the heart of why I can say I've read it before. Today I'm talking about the realm of the Elderlings, and I have been doing an annual reread of this series since 2001. So yes, there are entries in this series that I have read 21 times. Not all of them. Obviously not all of them had been published when I started this, and they've been added to the annual reread as they've been published. So the most recent, the very last book, The Assassin's Fate, I've only read I think 6 or 7 times. That's a lie, I finished the 8th reread a couple of months ago. And I've also only read the Rainwild Chronicles I think 6 times, and I'll get into that in a minute. Now this is going to be, as I've done with Discworld, this particular episode on the Rainwilds will be non-spoiler. It will be a bit more vague, a bit more general, and try and give you an idea of what this series that just means the world to me is. So, Realm of the Elderlings is made up of several shorter series, and if you've got no intention of reading any more than 1 or perhaps 2 of these trilogies, you can do that with the first 2, and those are the Farseer trilogy and the Liveship Traders trilogy. Point to note, when people who have read just those 2 trilogies tell you that you can start with either one in this series, they're really wrong. You absolutely need to start with Farseer, unless you're not going to read any further than Liveships. Farseer stands alone as a trilogy, and Liveships reads as though it stands alone as well. If you're going to continue the series, you must have read Farseer. So you have to go back and start again anyway if you started with Liveship. The reason I don't advise starting with Liveships is so much of the plot of Liveships completely undermines the things that you're given as beliefs in people in another area of the world, and it just makes it that much harder to connect with those characters. And that's a big problem, because the characters in Farseer are the characters that glue all of this together. The main character in Farseer is Fitz, and we meet Fitz in the opening sequence as a 6-year-old. Well, he thinks he's 6. We never actually find out exactly how old Fitz was in that moment, which means we never really know how old Fitz is. But he appears as a 6-year-old. And the Fitz and the Fool who we meet in the Farseer trilogy are the absolute core of the story of the Realm of the Elderlings. They're not in all of the books, which is I think why people think that was an awful sentence. The reason they're not in all of the books is difficult to explain, and the reason those books really aren't standalone is also difficult to explain without spoilers. I will get into it in a later video. For now, just trust that if you're going to read the entire saga, you need to read it in order. So you've got Farseer. Farseer is the first trilogy, and it's made up of Assassin's Apprentice, Royal Assassin, and Assassin's Quest. Assassin's Apprentice, just the title, gives you the completely wrong idea about what Assassin's Apprentice is about. It is not some badass training mission or montage or set of adventures that makes this incredible assassin. No, it's a coming of age story. There is a point at which he is apprenticed to an assassin, but that is entirely, well, it's not secondary because it is quite key to his character, but it's not a driving factor in his life. It is merely part of what makes him up. And growing with Fitz through Assassin's Apprentice. He ends Assassin's Apprentice at the age of 15. So that first book is absolutely a coming of age story. Royal Assassin gets a little more complex. It's certainly one of the most rewarding reads on the initial read of Farseer, and it just gallops along. There is so much going on in Royal Assassin that it keeps you hooked start to finish. Amazing book. Assassin's Quest is often the most divisive of the Farseer trilogy. This thing is huge. It's so many pages long, I'm not even going to tell you because it will frighten you away. It's huge. And if you haven't connected with Fitz by this point, there's a very strong chance you're going to struggle with Assassin's Quest. So if you don't love it, don't panic, you're not alone. And if you do love it, welcome to the club. The next trilogy after Farseer is the Live Ship Traders, and again, people will tell you can start here. You really can't. Please don't. And I will I will caveat that statement by, if you're really struggling with Farseer and you're this close to just never reading any Hobb again, then read Live Ships. And the reason I say that is because they're very, very different. Farseer is from a single point of view, and as I've said about Assassin's Quest, if you don't connect to Fitz, that's a really hard sell. Whereas Live Ships has multiple POVs, it has a far broader scope in storytelling, it has a very different feel, yet at the same time being unmistakably Hobb. Which is why, for those few people who were about to DNF the series as a whole, read Live Ships. Then go back to Farseer if you want to continue. By then you've got used to the style, you know what else is possible within the series, and you're more likely to continue. So, there was a big gap after Live Ships, and we got Tawny Man, the trilogy that follows. Oh, I didn't say. Live Ships is the books, the Ship of Magic, the Mad Ship, and Ship of Destiny. And as I say, they follow completely separate characters. Tawny Man comes back to Fitz and the Fool. It's made up of Fool's Errand, the Golden Fool, and Fool's Fate. The Tawny Man picks up 15 years after the end of the Farseer trilogy. And that is the point I measure it at, because even though Live Ships we know takes place 7 years after Farseer, I always forget, even though I have read them over 20 times. You'd think I'd remember. I always forget to try and keep track of how long that story progresses before we get to its end. Sorry about that. So I measure it from the end of Farseer, because I know at the end of Farseer how old Fitz is, and we're told very specifically that Live Ship starts 7 years after that, and after that same point, Tawny Man picks up 15 years later. So, the Tawny Man, we get many of the same characters from the original trilogy in Farseer. We get some new characters, and we have new adventures, we have new issues. And in between Live Ships and Tawny Man, you could read a novella. And I say could because it wasn't published until quite a lot later. So I'd reread this a lot before it appeared, so I didn't feel I gained necessarily any information from it. But for new readers, the novella, The Willful Princess and the Piebald Prince, actually gives you a fairly good grounding on the sort of the status quo of the world this is set in. And not all of the world that this is set in, because the world is massive. But the portion of the world that Fitz lives in, the novella is set about 100 years before, and it sets up a societal distaste for a certain kind of people, and that distaste, that bigotry, plays into the Tawny Man really heavily. So if it's your first read, that can be really helpful just to give you a sense of how ingrained some of the bigotry you're going to encounter is and the reasons for it. It's not essential, as I say. I read it plenty of times without, but it is a good little story, and if you are going to read it, there's the best place, after Life Ships and before Tawny Man. Hi, this is Editing Derri, and I'm going to stop this about here, or this particular clip is going to run way too long. I will upload the rest of it at a later date, because I'm going to come back to Discworld and start The Witches for my next video. So keep your eyes peeled, leave me a like, a subscribe, and if you hit that bell notification, you'll know when I come back to the realm of the Elderlings, because I will. With that, I'm going to love you and leave you, and I'll catch you next time.